Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 143 different nations looking for the best practices, the technologies, the services, and products. My name is Dr. Sam Hancock, the President, Executive Director of Emerald Planet, and we weekly broadcast around the globe on the newest information, the technologies, and the people that really are making a difference as we move through towards 2050, when we'll have 2 billion, I'll say that again, 2 billion new souls that we need to provide the food, the fuel, and the fiber. And so it's going to take a combination, a collaboration of millions of people to realize how we're going to move forward and be able to take care of all those folks. And I have a gentleman who has been working on that. He's part of Rotary International, Rotary District 7620 in the capital region in the United States. It's Robert Bob Parkinson, and he is the district governor and also the manager of the oyster farm out in Maryland. And Bob, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. I tell you, this is an exciting project. It's very practical, and it addresses so many issues that we face right now with the environment and also sustainable nutrition. It just really brings everything together. So tell us a little bit about your Rotary District, 7620, Rotary International, and then let's get into all these oysters that you're taking care of.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Rotary, of course, is a very large, the first civic organization in the world, and formed in 1905. So we're over 100 years old. We're 1.2 million worldwide. District-wide, we're 2,400. I call them alpha cats, alpha personalities of a cat that's hard to herd. So I've got 2,400 great Rotarians coming from professions, coming from professional backgrounds, and we work together to try to get what we call service above self. That's our motto.
I tell you, the whole thing about it, Bob, is I've been in, I guess at least 500 Rotary clubs all over the globe. Had a chance to speak at most of those. And no matter whether you're in downtown Tokyo or you're in Helsinki or you're in Durban, South Africa, no matter where you are, there's a similar type of personality and person there, and you just feel comfortable with them. They're leaders, and they're really reaching out into the community.
One of our attributes, of course, is to go, you get to make up at a different Rotary club. So if I'm in Tokyo, the food might be different, the language is different, but the modus operandi is the same. Yeah. It makes us feel very comfortable. Tokyo, Indonesia, South Africa, even other parts of the United States.
Oh, I tell you, it's just fantastic. And tell us a little bit about what's the purpose of Rotary, and then we really are going to segue right into this fantastic oyster project you have.
My perspective on Rotary, it's service above self. It's knowing yourself, knowing how you want to give back, when you start giving back, and then doing those projects that were required to make you feel good, using your head and heart to do good for the world, both locally and globally.
Yeah, this is the thing that I think people around the globe find it hard to understand, and even talking to people here in Washington, D.C., you know, they want to know, well, what do you get paid to do all these projects with Rotary? Because I'm involved in probably 5 or 6 within a year. And I said, no, you're actually paying to be involved in these projects. The exact opposite of that.
Well, we are kind of looking for whatever you have left over behind your family, your religion, and your job, to take all your time, your treasure, and of course your talent, the 3 T's to make Rotary work. We get paid 0.
So actually, it's the opposite. You're actually paying to be a part of that, and I just loved it. And my first scholarship came out of Rotary when I was about 15 years old in economics, and of course, you know, years later, I have my degrees in economics and doing things. But looking at who are the constituents of Rotary?
Well, the constituents of Rotary, I just mentioned that they're professionals or business owners, generally somewhere moving up the ladder in a company, have some time. I'm willing to give the time to Rotary and a little bit of treasure. Treasure comes towards the, as you get into your career in Rotary, which is forever.
Yeah. Yeah, once a Rotarian, hopefully always a Rotarian, and I think this is something that's very real. Now, the focus areas of Rotary, there's 6 of those. What are the focus areas?
Well, to prevent my forgetting something, because this is really new, we've been in a pilot program for 3 years of what we're focusing on, and this is both at the community district level and at the world level. Our focus areas are peace and conflict prevention and resolution. Our district has a grant going and working with Uganda right now. Disease prevention and treatment, water and sanitation, material and child health, basic education and literacy, and economic and community development. Now, if you take those 6, you can just about do anything inside those 6 somehow. And I think you're going to hear a little bit later in the show how we're using this water project, this reef building, to meet several of these categories.
Yeah, and it's very, very important. Talking about the international service projects, we have both the domestic projects, so if you're in India, you're doing projects with local schools or elder care or working with roads or providing a well or what have you. If you're in South Africa, it could be in crop or whatever it's going on there. So you have these domestic and then the international, but why does Rotary, even though it's in its name, Rotary International, why is such an emphasis on international projects?
Well, it's just so Rotary has boots on the ground everywhere. We probably are one of the best represented organizations, non-government organizations throughout the world. So this gives us the opportunity to do these projects internationally as well as locally. For most part, the United States has people from every country. We're the melting pot. And most of these folks do have some connection with their country that they came from, and this is kind of the start of working with those projects. Every one of those countries has a Rotary Club. So the Rotary Clubs of our country, the Rotary countries of the Western Europe, start working with the countries in Africa and Asia, and figure out what it is needs to be done in some one of these 5 areas. A lot of effort today is in the water area. Of course, we have the international project, polio. We're in the process of eradicating polio.
Yeah, and I tell you, that's a huge project, and Rotary itself has raised almost $1.3 billion with a B. That's a lot of money, and then it's matched with about another $4 billion. And my understanding, Bob, is that with the water project, Rotary is going to contribute about $5 billion into that. And then we're going to morph into maybe another $20 billion. It'll be coming from other organizations. So it's just amazing how huge all this is.
Yeah, well, if you take polio, leverage is kind of the same thing in the water projects. Polio, we put in $1.3 billion. The world has put in about $10 billion. So we're leveraging our effort, our people to do this, what they call these national inoculation days. If you think about it, India has 27 million children a year. They all have to be inoculated. Every year.
Yeah, and then you have the boosters, as they get into their teen years. So I tell you, it's just amazing. It's actually what's going on with all of this. So looking at Rotary International and what it's doing, how is it really working, building this sustainable oyster project that's going on out in the area where you actually live, out on the Eastern Shore?
How about the Western Shore?
Well, I don't know about the Western Shore, but...
St. Mary's River, you're going to hear a lot from Steve and Chris Buddick, follow me here, and then in our little panel at the end. The object here is to refresh the Chesapeake Bay. For those of you who are not around the Chesapeake, it is polluted with nitrogen and phosphorus. Those 2 chemicals, if you will, are the basis for algae growth. Algae blooms and die, and then the bacteria takes the oxygen down and kills the oysters.
Yeah, now looking at it now, I'm Rotary International, but yet they're involved in a very local area, the St. Mary's River, tributaries around that, which goes into the Chesapeake Bay and then the Atlantic Ocean. But why choose this specific area in order to have this kind of focus? Because this is taking a lot of time and investment to do this.
Well, this is where Rotary does really well. We are not the only organization in this project. We have a watershed association and we have a college. The reef is right off the college, so we are getting what I would call the science and the students, the education side. We have the folks around the river, the Watershed Association, interested in having their river reproduce again, be productive from an oyster perspective. And we have Rotary, who is interested in making sure that water project works and has sustainability.
Well, looking at all this, I know collaboration is really a key, and it's really the very essence of Rotary International and able to carry out all these projects. How do you foster this collaboration as the district governor for 7620 so that you can, as you said earlier, leverage the resources in Rotary, but you can multiply that by 5, 10, or maybe even 50 times by collaborating with other organizations?
Well, it comes from the folks that are in the clubs. We generally at the district level wait for them to come forward with an idea. We introduce it to the rest of the clubs in the district. We get to know each other district-wide. We have 4 districts around the Chesapeake Bay. Southern Virginia, us in the middle of Maryland, and the Eastern Shore district. There's 4 districts. They're all interested now. Have over the last year been working on this. We're starting to get going, and they're going to be helping us with both talent, people, and of course that treasure. Paying for being a Rotarian. Yeah,
well, going to the non-Rotary, I know that you really reach into the communities. You're working with the schools, St. Mary's College, and this is something that Rotary is doing all over the globe. So what can non-Rotarians contribute into the Rotary projects?
Well, of course, treasure. Always need
make
treasure.
Contributions.
You make contributions. I think Chris Puttick is going to talk about a little later some of the ways of contributing. For example, $10 buys you 1,000 oysters on shell. We need 4 million per acre. We got 3 acres. So if you do the math, that's a lot of dollars to get the oysters on the shell. That's one way to do it. My club, Lexington Park Rotary Club, contributed $3,000 the other day. That gets us a mound. Now that's got people curious, I hope, as to what's a mound. So you're going to hear more about that as we move forward.
Well, the last question I have, because we're just about running out of time, it's amazing how fast all this goes, Bob, but this service above self, what does this really mean, and how do you invoke this?
Well, I'm not sure we invoke it. It comes from within. Most of us get to have fun when your heart feels good. Sometimes it's sad, but fundamentally when your heart feels good. So when you do something, you can walk away and say, I helped the Chesapeake Bay. I helped improve the oyster reproduction in Chesapeake Bay. That's what this is all about.
And the environment, water, soil, air, all those things are very important. And thank you for being with us as we look at the people that are involved, as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. One in some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try.
Only you.
Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet, Washington, D.C. of the United States. We're looking around the globe at the technologies, the processes, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move towards 2050. It's one of the themes that we have is paving the way to 2050, the future vision. And we have an organization called Rotary International. It's represented here by Stephen L. King, who is the chair of the Rotary International District 7620 Future Visions Water Projects. And Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And I think this project, you've been on with us once before, and we're following up as this continues to expand. And this is really a very viable project that really has world implications.
Yes, it is. It's the problems in the Chesapeake Bay, we've learned, are not unique to the Chesapeake Bay. The loss of oysters and other shellfish reefs throughout the world, including the United States, has been tremendous over the past century or so. And it's affecting water quality in the oceans and in the estuaries throughout the world. And that's what the problem is in the Chesapeake Bay.
And it's amazing, Steve, how people think of the water in the ocean, the water in the lakes, the water in the creeks and the ponds and the rivers and all that. But there's not a whole lot of people that are actually looking at it as a system for the planet. And this is something that we really have to start doing. And even though you have a small local project, you're really looking at it as a global model program.
Yes, well, you know, we're starting small with the St. Mary's River, but and then eventually the Chesapeake Bay. But that is the purpose of the project, to be a model for the restoration of Chesapeake Bay. And then I think beyond that, once the Chesapeake Bay is restored, that model could be used in many other estuarine and ocean type environments.
Yeah, when looking at, tell us a little bit about this, because I really want to come up with a map that's coming up shortly. What are we looking at here, and what's the impact of this, not only for oysters, which is food, but also as far as the estuaries themselves?
Well, as you know, the Chesapeake Bay is in bad shape. In the summertime, we experience many areas that have no oxygen, what we call dead zones. And the cause of that is way too much algae. The concentrations of algae are so thick in the Chesapeake Bay during warm weather that light cannot penetrate to the bottom to this submerged aquatic vegetation that produce oxygen. And then when the algae die, the bacteria that consume the dead algae remove what little oxygen is in the water. And that kills the fish, it kills the oysters that are down on the bottom where they can't get to the surface where there's more oxygen.
So what's happening, Steve, is through the excess actually of nutrients going into the water, and then this combination and the multiplier effect, it really is just killing everything around it.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened is do you have that graph on?
Sure.
The graph shows the annual oyster harvest in Maryland and Virginia out of the Chesapeake Bay since 1880. And as you can see, it's gone from about 120 million pounds down to next to nothing now. We have less than 1% of the oysters in the Chesapeake Bay that were here prior to the Civil War.
And I'm going to put up this next graphic here, because I think this tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, that's a picture of of an area that was harvesting our oysters, a business that was harvesting oysters at the turn of the century, and you can see how many oysters are there. There was a tremendous effort after the Civil War to mine the reefs, the three-dimensional reefs, for the shell material as a construction material for building roads, for bedding, for building foundations, for agricultural purposes. Chicken, they made it into chicken grit. They use it for agricultural lime. And over about 150 years, these reefs that some were in the lower parts of the bay around Tangier Sound were 30 feet off the bottom, were actually mined right down to the bottom. And that was a very valuable material during the Reconstruction period after the Civil War. In addition,
and tell us the dates of the Civil War, because this is an international program, so people are going to say, what Civil War?
Yeah, well, from 1861 to 1865. And what happened in 1865 was, because of the need for this material, both the Maryland legislature and the Virginia legislature repealed bans on dredging mechanically dredging for oysters that had been in effect for 60-some years.
So what they were able to do then at those early days, they were able to replenish and renew themselves,
yes,
and keep the food supply coming, and then the shells and all that, the excess, then could be used for the construction materials. But what you're saying is, Steve, they were just taking out wholesalely and just using it for construction materials.
Well, that's right. Prior to 1865, the oysters could only be removed by hand. And so it was a slow, tedious process. They didn't take very many. And nature could replace those quickly. But when they repealed those bans on dredging, they estimate there was as many as 2,500 boats out on the ships out on the bay dredging. And it didn't take long, by the turn of the century, as you could see from that prior graph, where the habitat that went from the bottom to the surface and cleaned the bay water, they estimate every 3 days there were so many oysters on this habitat that used to exist in the bay. Every 3 days they could clean the entire volume of the bay and filter the algae out of the bay. Now there's less than 1% of those oysters. So the bay's natural algae filtration system doesn't exist anymore, and there's no way to keep the amount of algae in balance with Mother Nature's need for algae as a food source.
I see. Now, looking at this map we have here, we're talking about the St. Mary's River watershed, and this is so that even our domestic viewers will have an idea where this is and where it's actually located along the east coast of the United States.
Yes, well, it's on the western shore of Maryland. St. Mary's County is the furthest south in Maryland, and it's the original county of Maryland. It was established in 1864 by English settlers, and the St. Mary's River is actually where those settlers came on shore. And right next to the site of this demonstration reef is historic St. Mary's City and historic St. Mary's College.
Now, what was that date again?
1864.
1864.
I'm sorry, 1634.
I was going to say, I think it was much earlier than that.
1634.
16. Yeah. Now, looking at this, and I know you have the college involved, and that's a very fine college.
Yes.
It's nationally, internationally ranked, and it's amazing you have that type of resource in this area that many people would think, even that close to Washington, D.C., is way out there.
Yes, it's quite a drive.
Now, looking at now this new oyster reef, tell us about what is the new oyster reef, and let's bring this slide up so we can share this with our viewers.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to create a three-dimensional reef. We're going to build a reef that will go from the bottom of the river to within 1 foot of the surface of the river at low tide. And eventually, when the oysters inhabit the reef, those oysters will actually come out of the water at low tide. This is the way oysters used to exist. Unfortunately, after this mining that took place over the last 150 years or so, all the reefs were leveled to the bottom, and so the oysters now live on what we call bars, which is the worst place that they could live because that's where the least amount of oxygen is. That's where the sediments end up smothering them. But on a three-dimensional reef, that keeps them above the sediments that occur from erosion, and it allows them to filter the algae out of the entire water column. And improve the dissolved oxygen. And some of the studies that have been done with less extensive vertical reefs in other parts of the bay have shown that changing the currents by this vertical structure brings a whole lot more food to the algae, to the oysters, much more algae and other plankton for the oysters to eat. And I've seen some U.S. Army Corps of Engineers work that shows oyster densities as much as 1,000 per square meter, from less than a dozen up to 1,000 per square meter.
Looking at this is the site where you're actually working, and this is really very important for people to know, because I know this is something you're using to leverage and share with estuaries all across the globe about what you're doing, the experimentation. So tell us why you have this particular layout.
Well, it's intended to. We did a lot of research. We hired two of the professors, Dr. Bob Paul and Chris Tanner of St. Mary's College, to research all of the work that had been done so far throughout the United States to determine what is the best way to build the reefs. And the alignment of the reef is set, and the design of it to encourage as much as possible the oyster growth. And so we're giving the oysters a jump start. It took 5,000 years to build the reefs that were destroyed after the Civil War. We obviously can't wait that long for them to rebuild themselves.
Well, you and I may not be around in 5,000 years, so maybe we better get it done now.
We're creating their structure, and it will consist of 24 mounds that will be as tall as 8 feet and 9 feet of water at low tide, down to 4 feet and 5 feet of water. Those are closest to shore. And you can see they're lined up parallel to the shore, and they're arranged in a pattern that we believe will encourage the oyster's growth. And at the same time, we will then watch the oysters fill in the areas in between those mounds. Each mound will be 20 feet in diameter or 3 meters in diameter.
Now, this is very important, and this is what you're talking about as far as the distance from the shore. And also, too, you're going with the flow of the river, so it brings actually the food stock into the oysters instead of just having it natural. Is as you say, you're jump starting, you're helping the oysters to increase their size and also the amount of water they can actually filter.
That's right. And they will, they'll originally begin growing on the reefs, mounds themselves. But they will then, through the natural process, move horizontally and vertically. We expect over time they will actually grow right up onto the shore and out of the water at low tide.
That is absolutely incredible. So looking at this, what are we looking at here? We only have about a minute left, so we need to be quick, Steve.
This is a graph that shows how the oyster harvest in Maryland and Virginia since 1880 has declined. Most of this is due to habitat destruction. These vertical reefs were mined. Overfishing, and then the disease that hit in the 2 diseases in the 1950s and 60s. This is a picture that, or a drawing that shows horizontal and vertical arrangement of the reef. This would be a 4-foot tall reef using reef balls. Half the reef is going to be made out of reef balls. These are pictures of the reef balls. These are man-made, and we have 90 of them already made by volunteers. The other half of the reef will be out of recycled concrete because it's not clear which is the best material. And remember, we're trying to build this as a model for the Chesapeake Bay, so we need to determine what is the best and what the costs are associated with the 2 types of structural material.
Well, Stephen L. King, Chair of the Rotary International District 7620 Future Visions Water Projects, thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain-link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
before terrorists steal them.
Why did we learn all this?
My mother.
My son.
My sister-in-law.
Were all murdered September 11th.
Help protect America.
Together we can.
Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty
and justice
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, an up-to-date vaccination called the TD Booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD Booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 143 different nations, looking at the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And also we have to have very vivid and engaged individuals, both professionals and volunteers, that are making a difference as we seek to accommodate 2 billion new souls that'll be joining us on the planet by 2050. And also the world is urbanizing. Now 54% of the world's population live in urban areas. By 2050 that could be over 70%. So how are we going to provide the food, the fuel, and the fiber that's going to make a difference? A gentleman that's sitting beside me, his name is Dr. Christopher Puttock, who is the Research Associate at Smithsonian Institution, the National Museum of Natural History, has been working on this through Rotary International. And Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
I tell you, the things that you're doing, I'm just going to throw in here for the benefit of our good friend Bill Dent on the monarch butterfly project all over North America. And now you're getting involved in St. Mary's River with the oyster project. As a research scientist with a very famous museum in the world, why are you getting involved in these local community projects?
Well, I have a real interest in landscape restoration, and that's my driving force, is to see that the landscape gets restored, because there's a lot of damage we've done. Some of my projects it's really a coincidence that some of the species that I'm working on are down to the last 1% in the areas that they are. And so particularly in Maryland, we have done a number on the oyster.
Yeah, I tell you, when it go down to where less than 1% as far as the original mass exists, and we've done almost everything we possibly can to destroy it, it's really difficult to do all that. Oh, let me fix our slide here. Thank you very much. And what about Rotary International? Why are you affiliated with Rotary International, and what kind of platform does that give you to be involved?
Well, I became involved with Rotary when I was living in Hawaii, and there I was involved with the landscape of Hawaii. It maybe seemed like a small island, but we've done a tremendous damage to the natural landscape in Hawaii. And so then I moved to Maryland and found we have done exactly the same thing. As Bob Parkinson said, Rotary is an organization that, of a lot of people that want to give back, and service above self is the way we talk about that. And so I see what drives me is trying to serve the environment as well as the people. To make the environment more sustainable than we've allowed it to be.
Well, it's amazing that you're doing this in your professional life, but also your personal life, to be that engaged as far as these projects, just like with the monarch butterfly and, of course, the oyster restoration. Why oysters, and why get involved in St. Mary's River and the Chesapeake Bay?
Well, St. Mary's River is one of the best rivers we have left in Maryland. It's one of the least impaired as far as the pollution that goes into it, the nutrients and so on. So with landscape restoration, you always work from the good to the bad. You can't start in the middle of the bad and try and make it good. You have to work from the better areas and then keep working in towards the more disturbed areas.
Share that with me again. I think that's something that's very important for our audience to know, because I think this is really, in many ways, counterintuitive to how most things happen, because we look at blighted neighborhoods, we look at the lack of farming land, so we kind of hop in the middle of the problem and we try to fight or work our way out of that. And what you're saying is, Chris, is we need to find the better or the best of the better, and then try to build on that.
Yes, you have to work from the edges in. and then start to divide it up into smaller pieces once you've got those areas segregated, and then you can actually remove them. If you start working in the middle of the bad, then your project's more likely to fail because it's going to be overwhelmed and swamped by the atrocious conditions that are there. So like putting oysters in at the bottom of a water column, where the water column is always going to be anaerobic, then you're going to say these oysters are going to die. They're not going to be able to survive. So that's why we want to try and build the oyster reef to the surface where the oysters have the best chance of living. And then they can increase the clarity of the water column so they can live deeper, and so that then can be back on the bottom again.
Yeah, I think this is just fantastic, and I love the way that you're sharing this, because this is something that through the experimentation and this national international model program that you have through Rotary International Future Visions, it really is a way to share this knowledge here. And you know, a couple years ago it was over in the Ganges River, and they're trying to do that in Benares, where they're trying to restore a river that's absolutely dead. And you have this in China. It's just all over the globe. And so there's real principles here, Chris, that you're learning and demonstrating that can be used worldwide.
Right.
So looking at Rotary, how does Rotary allow you then to disseminate this information like what you're learning at the St. Mary's River? And then we're going to talk about the project you're working on as far as the oyster balls, which I call oyster domes, but okay.
Right. Well, so what we have is a project we want to have as a demonstration project that we can then export to other areas around the bay and to areas around overseas. Everywhere around the world, we've been doing damage to populations. We've been overfishing for oysters, for virtually everything else, and so using this technology, and it's been shown to be used for coral reefs and various other things, and very successfully. So we're not really inventing something new. This is a project. The construction has been going on for at least 15 years.
So what you're doing then, Chris, is you're taking something that you've been able to find as a best practice, and now you're making additional applications for it and seeing how you can then build on it.
Exactly. So the Reef Foundation, and I advise everybody to go and have a look at the Reef Foundation, to the Reef Ball Foundation, and see that there's more than 500,000 of these reef balls that we've been building being put out into projects around the world. Literally hundreds and hundreds of projects.
That's absolutely incredible. And is there a website that people can go and
yes,
see
the
that?
Reef Ball Foundation, the Reef Ball Foundation, .org, has a magnificent website, and you can drill down in there and find 60-odd projects that are going on around Chesapeake Bay of various sorts.
And then internationally as well.
And internationally, yes, as I say, all around the world.
Well, this is not something that was actually planned in our conversation, but let's talk about these the reef balls. What are these? What are we looking at here? It looks like a contraption, lots of metal, and something in between. So what's going on?
Okay, so what we have fiberglass molds that are made up. There are different sizes. There's around about 8 different sizes that are used. The ones that we use are called mini bay balls. These stand around about 1.75 feet high, and the molds have balls inside that actually create hollows that we then fill with concrete. And there's a slide of us filling these balls with concrete. You can see the concrete mixer there. We do this on more as industrial scale down at Shadyside with the cooperation of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So we're building 30 of these balls at a time, and so this is a really good way of producing a concrete format that oysters will settle onto and grow.
Now what we're showing here is this is actually the concrete being poured into the forms that you have here, and I assume this pipe on top is so these can be lifted and transferred somewhere else. And then I think we're getting to one of the scenes here of the volunteers working. Now, what's happening here?
Okay, what's happening here, when you pour concrete into small spaces, they form bubbles. And so we have to remove the bubbles of the concrete. So burping the concrete bubbles out.
So it's just like taking your baby, putting it on your shoulder, and
that's
you
right.
allow
You're just tapping it around.
Go out.
And in fact, this is a really good job for those people that don't have really strong muscles, because if you hit these things really hard, then it raises the balls in the middle, and so it does form a misformed ball. And so there's all sorts of techniques involved with getting these things right.
So this really is a learned skill that you have. And now this is something going into actually creating green jobs around the globe, because this is something that, you know, concrete, gravel, sand is almost universal on the planet. So this is something that could actually allow us then to transfer this technology around the globe, create new jobs, and at the same time expanding, cleaning up the environment and providing new food.
Yes, that's right. And these balls do not cost a lot to make. Certainly if you've got volunteer labour, then you're looking at maybe between $10 and $20 to make a ball that's around about 1.5 to 2 feet high. And then if you're paying labour for it, then you're getting up towards $60 to $100 per ball.
I'm going to go back to this right here.
Yeah.
So actually this is really the shape form of what's going on as far as the actual project itself. This is absolutely amazing, Chris, that you have this going on, and it looks like you can take volunteers and just about anybody can get involved in this.
Yeah, I've actually been saying that anybody from 12-year-olds to 102-year-old can actually work this, but maybe it gets up to about 90. But we've had volunteers that have been octogenarians that have been working this quite happily.
Oh, that's incredible. Let's just leave the image of this. I think this is really necessary. What do you see as far as the future for developing these oyster balls and the future of this project in St. Mary's and with the Chesapeake Bay?
Well, this project can be migrated to various areas around the bay. And as I was suggesting, we want to start with the good and work up towards the bad. And so let's not start in Baltimore, where we've got a lot of nutrient and coming down the river. We need to work from the south end to the north end.
And that's why the St. Mary's River,
is
and it makes sense. And it's just absolutely good providence that you have St. Mary's College, right there. And
the Watershed Association.
Doing excellent work.
Brilliant.
It's fantastic. Well, Chris Puttick, thank you for being with us, Dr. Chris Puttick, and thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing. No. 127 consecutive.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet. We started in 1973, and so we're bringing you the best information and the best practices that we can find in these 143 different nations. And we say we're looking for the 1,000 best practices, but actually we're already there. And so now we're shooting for 10,000 best practices. And I have three gentlemen with me from Rotary International involved in what I think is just an absolutely unique and fantastic project in restoring the oysters to St. Mary's River and to clean up the water that's flowing into the Chesapeake Bay, which actually ends up into the Atlantic Ocean. So I have sitting right beside me Robert Bob Parkinson, who is the District Governor for Rotary International, 7620. And he's an oysterman himself. He's a manager for a project there in Maryland. We have Stephen L. King, who is the chair for Rotary International District 7620 again. This is a Future Visions water projects, and Steve will talk about what Future Visions actually mean. And then Dr. Christopher Puttick, my buddy from the Monarch Butterfly Project. He's a research associate at the Smithsonian Institution, the National Museum of Natural History, and myself. Chris, talking about the restoring the oysters in the bay, what is the benefits of this kinds of project that is really literally hands-on? You're walking into the water, you're moving mud, you're pouring concrete. You know, this is the essence of a service project.
Right. The benefits are, you get the public involved. There's a lot of people that can be involved with in the voluntary way to actually make this work. And the more people we have working in it, the better they have an understanding of why these organisms in particular are important.
Well, looking at this photograph here, we have a lot of people lined up. I know these are volunteers through the Rotary clubs, but also, Steve, being the chair of this project, you're actually reaching out and collaborating with a great number of organizations. Why using Rotary as a base, why the collaboration, and then give us a sense of how extensive this collaboration is.
Well, yes, it is extensive. We're working with St. Mary's College of Maryland, who happens to also be they provide the academic expertise. They happen to be the adjacent property owner. We're involving the Rotaract Club there, the students in the Rotaract Club at St. Mary's College of Maryland. And eventually we hope to involve the entire faculty and students of the college. We are also working with the St. Mary's River Watershed Association and all of their members. And we're doing that because both of those groups have the expertise that we don't have. This needs to be a sustainable project. So once Rotary's part of the project is completed, in terms of the construction, it's going to be the Watershed Association and the college to make sure that the reefs are maintained properly, that they're monitored. We will be monitoring these reefs for the quality of the oyster or the rate of the oyster growth, problems that may occur in the growth of the oysters, water quality, this sort of thing, for a number of years afterwards, so that we can document the superior habitat that this type of a reef provides.
Now, looking at this, Bob, you're a district governor of Rotary. That means a whole lot because there's a lot of work involved in that. It takes a number of years to get into that position, but also you're an oysterman yourself, and so this is part of your profession and the background of your family out in this area on the St. Mary's River area. And we're looking at these oyster balls. Now, to me, they look like domes, but I'm told I have to call them balls. But why this design, and how does this really help? Now I'm going to the oystermen themselves and the livelihood, the economy of the area. Why are these important, and what are they going to be able to do for the economy and the environment?
Well, the oyster ball is not solid. You know, so it's got a hole in the middle of it. That allows oysters to fill up the inside. They attach Theoretically, we think they're going to attach to these oysters, depends on the time of year, and grow, spawn, attach, grow, spawn, and pretty soon, we don't have a picture of it, but you can see some places where these balls have been put in place, and they're just populated with oysters. You can't see the ball.
That's just absolutely incredible. And looking at this is, I understand from Chris, we were sharing earlier, these are quite inexpensive.
Yeah, I think, what are we talking about? 3 bags of concrete, 4 bags of concrete?
What are we talking about, Chris, as far as the cost of one of these?
The cost is, the raw material cost is around about $18 per oyster ball. You got labor on top of that, and you've got a delivery of concrete. So we're looking at what the retail price is around about $100 per oyster ball that we have, and each one of those balls will serve to support around about 200 oysters. So in turn, you can do the math on how much water can be processed by a 3-year-old oyster. If one oyster processes 55 gallons of water a day, and you've got 200 oysters on each ball, this is it's a water cleaning unit that's going to process a lot of water a day. Well, and every year, much more.
Well, I understand from Steve, this is something that was happening every 3 days. I think you were sharing with me, yes, is that with a number of oysters, they could actually literally clean the whole bay.
Every 3 days.
And the bay is not a small body of water.
No, it isn't. It's the largest estuary in North America.
And that's an incredible amount. But looking at it from your background, you have a water background. You, yes, worked with potable water, also wastewater treatment and all that. What is the long-term benefit of having these oysters out there, and to grow the oysters so organically and naturally you're starting, yes, to clean the bay?
It's the only way that we can truly clean up the Chesapeake Bay and restore the water quality. That's the purpose of the project. Until you restore Mother Nature's natural algae filtration system, which was the oyster, it's important to control the amount of human-induced nutrients going into the bay. But doing that alone is not going to result in the improvement of the bay water quality. I was involved for over 30 years reducing the point source of nitrogen and phosphorus. And a lot of progress has been made during that period. There's also been progress made on non-point source. But as you know, Sam, the quality of the bay has deteriorated despite the efforts that have been made so far.
Yeah, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars, Steve, that has actually been put into this to, yes, clean up the bay, and it just seems to keep getting worse.
Well, it's because it's important that we continue to do that and we reduce it lower, because the excess nitrogen and phosphorus is making the problem even worse than it is already. It's already bad because the natural filtration system is gone, and this has caused the amount of algae to be out of balance with Mother Nature's needs. So what we're trying to do is, while the effort to reduce the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus, excess nitrogen and phosphorus that's going into the bay, take place, we're trying to restore the Mother Nature's natural filtration system, so we can get the algae back in balance by those oysters, which, as Chris said, at 55 gallons a day for a 3-inch oyster, they can filter a lot of water. We're trying to restore, our ultimate goal of this project is restore 35,000 acres of the 70,000 acres that used to exist in the bay.
Yeah, that's just amazing. And Bob, as you know, I think this project that you're working on through the Future Visions program of Rotary International is about 3 acres, a little bit over 1 hectare of an area. Looking at it as a Rotarian and also as a businessman in the oysters, how do you see this balance between a civic organization like Rotary International getting involved and working with the oystermen in this area, the ones that really depend on the water of the oyster for their livelihood?
Well, the whole purpose of this is sustainability, and as Chris mentioned in the earlier segment, the oysters are going to be sustainable. What that means is they'll reset themselves, but the river already has places where they can reset, so they'll migrate off this reef into the rest of the river, and those and downriver, which is outside of the sanctuary, that's where the watermen actually are picking up oysters and harvesting today. We hope to improve that for them, as well as the sanctuary side of the river.
Well, Chris, you've been involved, and that's how we met. Actually, it was through the Monarch Butterfly program. We're going to put another plug for build in all this. But there were actually, I think, lessons learned in that project. Really is a North American project. These principles you're applying into this oyster development program. What do you see some of the parallels of those?
Get a reef in there.
Well, the parallels, certainly in terms of education, we can work through schools, so there are parallels there. There are parallels in terms of the damage we've done to the environment across the nation by reducing the fields that grow milkweed for the monarch. We've reduced the number of acres of oyster reef, down from 70,000 acres of oyster reef down to virtually nothing. So in terms of devastation, we've really been, we've done a number on everything. But in terms of what we can do, we can get everybody from school children all the way up to third age people to really work and be engaged in the projects.
Bob, you wanted to expand on this notion of the reef and the importance of that. Share that with us.
Well, what I'd really like to make a plug for is join us at our website, which is rereefthebay.org.
Once more.
rereefthebay.org.
Okay.
And there you can see what we're doing, stay up to speed with what we're doing. And I think shortly we should have a way to be able to help.
They can do that right now.
So you can help us financially. You can buy oyster spat on shell, you can buy reef balls, you can buy the entire mound by a donation to our.
When you say buy, it means you're going to donate to end that, because we can't sell things on Emerald Planet, so we want to stay with the realms of what we're doing. But Steve, looking at what you've been doing, again, you have over 30 years in this whole thing as far as water quality, and as the fact is, you were actually doing it.
Yes.
But it's amazing how you see how these tiny little oysters have such a huge impact, not only here, the Chesapeake Bay, the Atlantic, but really for the globe.
Yes. Yep. Well, we've devastated these natural filter feeders throughout the world, and we're paying the price for that in the poor water quality that has resulted. It's really simple when you think about it, Sam. If you turn the filter off on a swimming pool for 364 days of the year and only turn it on once a year, why would you be surprised if it wasn't green with algae all year long?
Yeah.
That's what's happened to the bay, and that's what's happened to the oceans and many of the estuaries throughout the world.
As we create the Emerald Planet.